Hello. Sorry, everyone, for some technical difficulties, but we're here now, kicking off Smart Energy Summit 2021 October edition. And we got some exciting speakers today. So hopefully we can get everything ironed out in the next few minutes, and we'll get to see all these folks. The focus of today is going to be discussing partnerships and tech advancements that are moving the smart energy industry forward. We're going to start with a short presentation by me of consumer data that we collected at Parks Associates, along with some industry analysis and examples of some of the learnings being kind of put into action right now in the marketplace. And then we're going to have a number of great speakers, visionary, a panel, and later we're going to be doing a networking discussion in Zoom, and we're going to be sharing that link later in the chat. So keep an eye out for that, and hopefully you will be joining us. That'll give you an opportunity to talk to the Parks Associates teams about any sort of follow-ups on the data that I'm presenting, and also speak to the speakers that we have coming today. We also want to thank our sponsors, Bidgely, Grid4C, Austin Energy, Decibel, Flow, American Water, and Very, who are contributing to our efforts today, and also all of our supporters. We've got a number of great organizations that are working with us on this virtual series. We're really excited. Usually it goes super smoothly, and then in the future, we'll be doing it in person again, and we'll be asking for sponsors for our in-person, and then we won't have to fight with our platform. So today, we're wrapping it up for the year, SES 2021, but also want to remind you that we have available a number of different topics in our kind of backlog of things that we worked on this year. And so you can find those materials and also videos of presentations and panels and things like that on our website. Let us know if you need any help finding that. All right, and so now we're ready to kind of look at some consumer data, see what's going on in the industry. Please, everyone, follow me on Twitter, by the way. All right. Okay, so today what we want to cover is the growth of IoT and how that impacts specifically the smart energy space. And also we want to look at some future opportunities through partnerships and new technological innovations that are going to help kind of grow the space as we have a better user experience, better quality and reliability for smart energy users, and of course, new functionalities from tech. So as we said, talking about IoT's growth, the number and diversity of connected devices in the homes is rising every year. Next to security and entertainment devices, there are also many devices designed to help consumers manage their home environments, both in terms of comfort and minimizing costs. Now that, of course, is our energy management products that we're talking about a lot today. Energy management is a particular area where smart devices can be very practical and beneficial. Everyone is able to save a little bit of money and get a positive return on investments for products they bring into their home. There is also a substantial group who is interested in these products because of the social good of reducing energy usage and reducing the environmental impact. So taken together, we have opportunities for growth, and we see future potential. In fact, our research shows that consumers are willing to interact with inspectors, but with about 1 in 7 saying that they would welcome an inspector to look at their energy use and management. And that is a great foot in the door for device sellers and also professional services companies themselves, who would get the inspectors in there that could also do some sales while they're talking. So looking first at the lower price point devices, we typically put under the smart home umbrella, but today we're kind of framing as smart energy. We've seen the growth of adoption for smart thermostats and smart light bulbs in particular grow over the past 5 years. Both have benefits that are very easy to communicate to the consumer, so it makes sense that they're the ones that are growing the fastest. And now we see them over the 10% benchmark that I look at generally as a sign that a product has really kind of made it. Now, looking forward, purchase intention is very high. And we know that purchase intention doesn't always lead to an actual purchase, but it is telling that these numbers are going up and up. About a third of broadband households say they are considering purchases in each of these product categories. That's great news. So where have these consumers been buying, and what can we expect them to be doing in the future in terms of acquiring these products? Well, we see that many are happy to buy online or at retailers and install themselves, but that's not true of all consumers. Almost half prefer to buy somewhere else, and that's spread across a number of different options. So if you look at thermostats and in-wall outlets, and you see that there's interest in getting those products from ISPs and HVAC contractors, and those consumers are going to be interacting more and more with those type of organizations as they continue to move and renovate in response to COVID-driven lifestyle changes last year. And that just means potential access to the consumers for players in this space. Now, speaking of doing renovations, we're also seeing slow but steady growth for the major home energy equipment. Now, this ownership follows a pattern of growing familiarity for these products because device manufacturers are investing in raising awareness for these products and communicating their value. But there are still some barriers between familiarity and final purchase. So, for example, adoption can require significant investment for some of these products, and it can take a long time to recoup investments because of the low cost of energy in many areas in the US. Consumers may also have concern that solar or wind energy is less reliable in their minds. But despite all these purchase intentions being high, it's looking up. It's driven by younger respondents who are generally part of a new generation of consumer who might not have all the same reservations about solar and EVs that older customers may have. Also notable, regulatory changes in California and New York. California is requiring new buildings have solar PV systems for electricity, and policies in New York are promoting greater adoption of renewable energy resources. And these are just a couple of the changes that are happening in the marketplace that are all pushing for growth. Now, again, looking at channel, we see consumer preferences and for these devices follow the same pattern as before, which is to say there's no clear favorite. There's some are comfortable buying online or at a big box store, but others would rather have service providers such as energy companies or utility companies come in and do the installation for them because of the perceived expertise with regards to these devices and also knowledge of their home setups. So as we noted before, this is an opportunity for multiple players to get in the game when it's not just online retailers that are dominating the space. So clearly our consumer data is showing opportunities for energy players, and some of these opportunities can be realized or unlocked through partnerships and innovation. So let's take a look at some examples that we're seeing today. Now, the first way to bring extra value to the customer is to improve customer engagement and create a better experience. And we see companies today are doing that with data. Utility companies are leveraging technology to gather, analyze, and report usage data to customers in new and more easily consumed ways. Several of these delivery systems include power bills that are more easy to read, sophisticated home energy reports, and customer support reps who are armed with Salesforce integration in this example, and they are better able to answer questions when they get calls inbound from consumers because they have great reporting on the back end that they can reference. That makes them great advisors, and that can create a better experience for people contacting the call centers. So all this product innovation that the utilities are using is born out of several software companies that are generating AI-powered reports and home energy reports for these utilities to distribute. Now, the next type of partnership we want to look at is around solution delivery. Product manufacturers and utilities both have a stake in growing consumer investment in energy efficiency, and you can see that playing out in marketing and online presence. Manufacturers are promoting demand response programs, and utilities are acting as channel partners or retailers for the manufacturers of these smaller smart energy devices we talked about earlier. And utilities are connecting interested customers to government rebates on things like solar panels, and also vetted contractors to sell and install the major energy equipment that consumers could use a little extra help in bringing into their home. So all of these different players are working together to drive adoption. Now, clicker problem there. Once customers sign up and the devices are in the homes, AI and machine learning software on the back end really do the hard work. And so we're seeing some of those innovations in technology from some of the companies that we mentioned earlier today, Grid4C and AutoGrid. And they're making the utility side efficiency happen with demand response programs and algorithms that are working there. Now, the final partnerships I want to highlight is with Savant, because we have the Savant person coming for our visionary speaker. So it feels like a good thing to do to highlight a little what they're doing. So they're working with RingX to the Savant home side is working with RingX to bring in home more video device options for customers of Savant Home. And Savant also recently merged with a company called RacePoint that our speaker is from, and that's going to be called Savant Power. So now Savant users are going to have this entire portfolio that includes all these different devices, including smart energy devices. So we're going to learn a little bit more about that now. Hello, Anna. Can you hear me now?
Hello, Chris. How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Good.
We're fighting through some difficulties here, but now everything's online. We got you. That was a cool video. Some nice music.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that sounded super weird. I make music, so I'm always like listening to people's theme music. All right, so we're really excited to hear. I got to look at a little bit at your presentation in advance, so I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Do you want to just go right into your presentation? And then audience members, please put questions in the comments, and when Anna's done, we will essentially I'll handle asking questions on behalf of the audience. And I should also introduce you, Anna. I'm sorry. So this is Anna DeMio. Hi, thank you for coming on today. So you have a very deep background in wind power, EVs, renewable energy stuff. You're a professor. You started a business called RacePoint that Savant then acquired. So you're a really high level expert in this. We're excited to have you today, and I appreciate your time.
Great.
Hopefully you can successfully share here.
Great. Thanks, Chris, and kudos to you and everyone at Parks Associates for transitioning the way you did so quickly. Here we are, almost 2 years into this remote platform, and we're still working out certain things. But good job there.
Yeah.
So can you see my slides all right?
Yes, looks good.
Let me just move over so I can share better here. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to start off today giving you a little background on Savant and Savant Power, because I think it's an interesting partnership along with GE Lighting, a Savant company. And then we'll dive into discussing really this exciting point in time that we find ourselves in terms of our changing electricity grid, how we think about energy, and really the interface of energy and smart home. There are a number of stresses and events that are coming together in recent years that make finding solutions for energy incumbent upon us getting smarter about how we manage our demand and how we think about power in general. And we're really on this precipice of transforming how we produce and consume power as we grow into a society that is becoming increasingly energy literate and increasingly engaged and excited about this space, be it around solar panels or batteries or electric vehicles or just smart home devices in general. And really, the great news here is that we're at a place in time where the solutions that we bring together not are only good for consumers. So when we bring together smart home and smart energy, of course, consumers benefit, but also the utility grid as a whole will benefit, and thereby our environment will benefit as well. So that's really makes this a really exciting place and time to be. Hopefully you can all see my screen advance here. Or maybe not. Let's see. All right. All right, so a little background on Savant. Savant was started in 2005, and it set out to really create the best smart home experience there was. And over the past 15 to 16 years, Savant became a leader in smart homes in the luxury space. So when you think about it, 15, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, it was really that luxury space that we're buying this automation platform. And at its heart, Savant is a software company, right? Over the last decade and a half, it has profiled literally thousands of devices. I think we're over 10,000 devices now to control everything from lighting to shades, music, entertainment, cameras, security, climate, wellness, all of these things combined. And Savant is really known for its software platform and for its intuitive user experience. Then in 2015, I collaborated with the owner of Savant to start RacePoint Energy, which is now Savant Power. And our tagline has always been rethinking the grid, which is really what we set out to do. Right? So the premise of Savant Power was based on some of my academic work, which really focused on community scale renewable energy, which leveraged energy monitoring and load management as a significant pillar to microgrids that managed not only the storage and the solar and the other inputs, wind, even tidal, but also the loads as well. So when you look at Savant Power, we have our, here's sort of our product offering. So we have our smart electrical panels, which we call the in-charge panels, that do revenue-grade energy monitoring and control. And they become a significant component into our microgrids for homes and businesses and even communities. And then the software that runs the energy management system that makes this happen has also been ported over for the utility space to be able to do a DERMS platform. And then all of this is underpinned by our software, the tools, the user experience that really brings this home for the end user, right? It makes energy a reality for them. So our in-charge power panel is based on our intelligent companion modules, which you see down on the lower left there. And when we started out to do this some 5 years ago or so, 6 years ago, we made a deliberate decision not to do a proprietary panel, but rather to design a companion to a breaker that plugs into any standard panel. So Schneider, Eaton, Siemens, ABB, it plugs into a standard panel and does revenue-grade energy monitoring and real-time control. And it can control any size circuit, 3-phase or single-phase, and really the whole system optimizes energy use in a home or in a business. Schneider, I'm happy to say, is utilizing this technology in its smart platform in a partnership with Schneider and Savant Power that was just announced this week. So we're super excited about that and to be working with Schneider. Okay, so now that in-charge panel you see on the right is a key component to be able to monitor and manage demand of everything in the home or building at the breaker level, but also at the smart device level. So those 10,000 profiles I told you about from Savant, well, Savant Power has been adding to that library in the traditional energy devices like hot water heaters and electric car chargers and smart appliances, excuse me. And if you look to the left, we look at all of the inputs into the grid. So the grid itself, into the microgrid. So the grid itself, local generation like solar and wind, storage, generator, and even cogen. And then what our software does is it takes all of these inputs and optimizes the system with its machine learning to really capitalize on economics, on resiliency, to really make a true microgrid. So when you think about the way it works is that the demand, the system manages the demand to turn on and off loads to capitalize on things like time of use pricing. And then as the grid goes down and we start to use up our storage, we can turn off loads in order to extend the hours of grid autonomy for the system. There we go. I'm having a little bit of delay here, but I think you can see what I'm looking at. There you go. And then, of course, the user interface, which is the platform, like I said, that really brings this home to the user. A big lift, I'm sure many people on the call probably have the same experiences. A big hurdle is to really educate consumers so that they understand what they're looking at and can make more informed choices and decisions. So when we started the energy company, the long-term vision was and really still is to make impactful change for consumers and for utilities. But being a sister company to Savant and now a division of Savant, it really afforded us the ability to take these years and prove out our technology with that luxury consumer base that is home to Savant. And it's that base that really had the disposable income to be the early adopters of this technology. Then in the summer of 2020, everything changed when Savant acquired GE Lighting from GE. And it really just opened up Savant and Savant Power in a much bigger way, right? So this is GE Lighting, right? This is Thomas Edison's own company, over 100 years of history, an iconic brand, amazing retail reach and operations, and also a whole smart technology platform of its own with its sync line of smart lighting and smart devices. So this acquisition really made it possible for us to reach a much wider customer base with products that are affordable and that can really hit the average consumer. So together we can control everything in the house, and we believe strongly that smart energy is an essential building block to the whole smart home story. So together these three companies have partnered together under this one umbrella to really create a comprehensive smart home experience, not only for consumers, which is very important, whether it's homeowners or businesses, but at the same time helping utilities to rethink the grid as a whole. So let's talk about the grid. Why is smart home and smart power so important? And what's really driving this push, and how far do we need to go? And really, the utility grid is a great place to start this discussion. So we have aging US infrastructure. We have increased weather volatility that's causing more frequent and longer power outages. We have an explosion of renewable energy and EV demand, along with decreasing prices, as well as changes in the regulatory structure, which cannot be understated in terms of what we can do as companies to make a difference. So the speaker earlier mentioned that she's in Texas and she didn't really think about energy until what happened last February in that part of the country. And it's so true. It's often said that electricity is like air, that you don't think about it until you don't have it. And when you think about our electricity grid, it's remarkably similar in model as the original grid that came out of the current wars between Edison and Westinghouse. It's this incredible engineering feat that produces and manages vast amounts of power in real time. And one of the inefficiencies of the grid is that it's based on this production following demand model. And what that means is that we use power as much as we want. We turn things on and off as much as we want, whenever we want it. And then utilities are required to ramp up and down generation to meet that demand. So it's this one-sided grid where utilities have made a science, really, out of tracking our demand across sectors of the economy, times of day, times of year, even for major events like the Super Bowl or the Emmys, right? And this requires utilities to keep a large amount of generation at the ready, even though it's called into service relatively infrequently. So where do we go from here? We're really in the process of this paradigm shift where using distributed technology, we're looking at flipping the model to a demand following generation model. And that is that as solar and wind becomes available, we can ramp up and down we can ramp up and down demand to meet that generation. Right. And this has a second really important factor to help us think through. The ability to manage those electricity loads, that demand, also enables utilities to shift peak to smooth out the demand curve, and thereby it reduces the overall amount of generation it has to keep at the ready. So if you look at this curve, this is a typical residential area where you see a peak that comes up in the evening, say between 4 and 10 at night, when everyone goes home for dinner and washing laundry and maybe charging cars and whatnot. At least pre-COVID, that's how the world worked. And so when you look at this, you see that that part in pink there, utilities are required by law to keep enough generation ready to meet whatever that peak is. But if we could use beneficial electrification through smart devices to shift that over, we could greatly reduce the amount of traditional generation that utilities have to keep on standby for us. Okay, so when I talk about the motivators for this paradigm shift, I always talk about the 3 E's, those being energy resiliency, economics, and the environment. And interestingly, these 3 E's that are driving utilities to rethink their business models, they're the same 3 E's that are driving consumers to invest, in energy at home and for their businesses. It's much like the local food movement. People are becoming more and more aware of their energy choices, and they're becoming more and more energy literate, and they really want to become active participants in their own energy future. And so, as I said before, this really is a win across the board. So let's talk about energy resiliency. For everyone, that means keeping the lights on, right? Utilities need to do this, and consumers rightly demand uninterrupted power for both their safety and security. And I would say that, in a COVID world where so many of us work from home and often our kids are studying from home, this is even more important than ever. And then economics. Utilities got to make money, right? They have to make money to stay in business. And they're faced with a whole bunch of costs. They have aging infrastructure, and the anticipated costs of replacing this infrastructure is really making utilities rethink their business model as a whole. For consumers are seeing a declining cost in solar, a declining cost in storage, so investing in their own backup, sometimes generator, but more often now, batteries are playing a leading role. And some are even starting to see that their utility bills are changing from a flat rate to a time of use. And this is something they can capitalize at home and for their business. And then there's the environment. So utilities have environmental regulation, which is forcing them to invest in green, both in green generation as well as efficiency programs. And then for consumers, whether it's, true environmental stewardship that's motivating them, or maybe it's a second feel-good deal closer to one of the other motivators, consumers are definitely interested in contributing to the solution in this area. Let's talk a little bit more about the environment. So climate change is the existential crisis of our times, no doubt, and the climate problem at its core is an energy problem, right? 75% of all greenhouse gases come from the burning of fossil fuels. In the US, 25% of that comes from electricity generation, much of which is wasted, which you see here up in the right in the Lawrence Livermore power flows. And there's an overlap between that and the 30% that comes out of the residential and commercial sector for greenhouse gases. And then we have another 30% in transportation. So this is a big problem, and we're going to need big solutions if we even have a chance to stay within that 1.5 degrees Celsius rise that we set out in the Paris Agreement. So how do we achieve this? So for North America, a significant part of the solution looks something like this. 1, we need to electrify buildings. 2, we need to electrify transportation. And 3, we need to decarbonize the grid. And I don't mean to say that as a 1, 2, 3 process. I see these all happening concurrently. But really, that gets us a large chunk of the way there. And what do you know? Electrifying homes and buildings really goes hand in hand with the smart home. Right? We're seeing more and more homes move to all electric, either by choice or by local mandate that was mentioned earlier. These homes are adding smart appliances, smart lighting, and often complementary local energy in the form of solar and or batteries. And this is an opportunity for smart devices not only to improve the quality of life of the consumers, but also to control beneficial electrification. What I mean by that is that there are certain devices that really lend themselves to be able to be managed across different times of day. Ones you hear about mostly are heating and cooling, hot water, domestic hot water, as well as EV chargers. And so we can leverage this beneficial electrification to improve the grid as a whole through demand response programs and the like. And we're seeing utilities start to offer these programs and really to incentivize these smart devices. Back to Texas, if grid operators in Texas could have shed loads in a much finer resolution, they could have greatly reduced the impact from weather events last February. And we work with a lot of builders who are now building communities with this resiliency piece built in, both in terms of storage and renewables, but really on the ability to shed loads as well. Okay, the second part of the equation was electrifying the transportation. And as I think everybody knows that EV sales are on a steep incline, I get asked all the time about whether I'm concerned that too many EVs will overburden and further break the grid. And you see here the stat that 25% EV penetration would increase the peak demand to 30% of the grid. And that would be a problem if we kept the status quo of the grid today. But really, that's not an option to us, in my opinion. Really, in my opinion, EVs are poised to be one of the greatest assets to the grid, first with beneficial electrification that I just explained, and then moving into vehicle to grid or V2G. The average American vehicle only drives, I think it's just over an hour a day. So there's a huge potential to utilize all of that for storage. Willie Kempton was an early pioneer in V2G, and he did some estimates on what the increase of the EV fleet adoption could mean if we could tap into both the charging and discharging of all of that distributed storage between the grid and our homes. And that brings us to decarbonization of the grid, which is a huge task. Don't get me wrong, but good news on the horizon. So renewable sources of power generation are the fastest growing source of new generation capacity for the utilities. I think it's about 80% now. In the US, I believe it's 20% in renewables, about 10% of that is solar and wind, if I have those numbers right. But we know that leaning in hard to renewables such as solar and wind, it is possible. We've seen other countries adopt very aggressive energy mixes. But we also know that to be successful in this, we have to manage demand and really create smarter distribution networks. And by adding flexible load management, grid operators excuse me, can balance the grid and synchronize the demand with that generation of solar and wind that's less dispatchable. That's the model of demand following generation that we're trying to get to. And ultimately, we can move the grid from a centralized system to a distributed system where smart homes and smart buildings and local storage all can be aggregated together to shave and shift that peak load, thereby making us overall a more resilient grid. And at the same time, offering consumers more choice and more benefits for their home or their business. So this is the diagram that you're looking at of the Savant Power DERMS platform. So we took our energy management system and we just ported it over to the utility place to be able to aggregate different loads. So on the right, you see standard loads that can be managed with our smart breakers. On the left, smart devices that can be controlled through third-party integration, API or cloud to cloud. And together, we can take all of this along with distributed or centralized storage to really create a virtual power plant that utilities can utilize in place of a traditional fossil fuel generation. So here's a quick look at that. We'll see if this plays. See if we have any luck here. There you go. So in a house where you say you have 3 loads, a hot water heater, HVAC, and a car charger, and either in real time or pre-scheduled, we can aggregate all of that demand at a region, a neighborhood, even down to a street level, so that the utilities can offset load when they need to, rather than bringing new generation online. Inverse can happen in some places. We're working with certain utilities who have an excess of wind power in the middle of the night, and they actually want to increase the load instead of decrease it. So it can work both ways. So to sum it all up, people want to be part of the solution, and people want energy independence. And smart energy it's an important pillar to the smart home. Together, smart energy and smart energy and smart home together, they offer consumers really the opportunity to take control of their energy choices and really be part of their own energy future. I can't tell you, it's an exciting time to be working in this space. And I'm really looking forward to all the technology, the innovation, the policy, and really the collaboration and the partnerships that are formed so that we can achieve a much better grid, but also a much better planet. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Hi, Anna, that was great. So thank you for presenting all that information. You want to turn your camera back on?
Yeah, I'm trying. Give me a second.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions. So we're only a little bit over, so we have time to answer questions if you're down for some questions. So the first one is a equipment question in terms of building out your home. Do you have to replace all of your breakers, or can you start with just 1 or 2 and then build out more breakers as you go?
You can start out with just 1 if you'd like to, and build out as you go. The thing is that for every companion module, it takes up 2 slots in your electrical panel. So adding companion modules contingent upon space available in your electrical panel. And it can either be plugged into your panel if there's extra slots, or it can be a second panel that's wired in series with the first panel.
Gotcha. Thank you. Very detailed answer. Next one is kind of a use case question. So you were talking a little bit about the wellness offering. So we look a lot at independent living as a growth area, both for connected health, but really for all smart devices in general. Mm-hmm. Have you guys been looking at that at all? And what would your kind of independent living approach be?
That's a good question. So one thing I'll say is that, as I mentioned in the talk, a lot of the technology, at least on the Savant side, has been really geared around that luxury home space. And now, as we've joined in partnership with these 3 companies, we're trying to move into a much broader view. We haven't looked specifically at that space yet. But I can tell you that a lot of the work we've done around wellness, things like circadian rhythm and daylight mode versus sunset mode, these sorts of things will all be very applicable. It's just a matter of the way we see it is that we've built this incredible platform over the past decade and a half, and now we're just excited to be able to port it to different applications, like we're doing in the utilities.
Yeah. So the kind of theme of our, I guess, session today is partnerships, and your history is with RacePoint, and then Savant kind of brought you guys on board, and they work with a bunch of other big companies. They've been kind of acquiring other organizations. So can you talk a little bit about working kind of across silos and with other business units like GE Lighting and stuff like that, as you're bringing your kind of smart energy solutions on board?
Sure. Well, I can't say enough great things about joining forces with GE Lighting, a Savant company, because it not only is a great group of people with such a deep history and experience that they come. Many of the people, RacePoint and now Savant Power is a pretty young company, right? And here's GE Lighting, a Savant company that comes from a much bigger company. People have been working there 25, 30 years. So you can imagine the merging of these two cultures and these two, and it really has clicked because we can see where each other complements one another. And that's been great. And we can all recognize the value of the products that we're bringing into the larger entity. Working with other third parties is, I find always enjoyable to understand what devices are coming to the market, and around the energy space, there's so much innovation. And so learning about it and then interfacing with it and profiling it either through APIs or cloud to cloud, it's a fun part of the job for the team.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, it really is interesting having people coming from a legacy organization like that with such deep history, and then now they're working with all you kind of smart young companies. So that's a really interesting marriage of cultures for sure. Mm-hmm. So something I was kind of reflecting on, you guys are clearly, because Savant is a software company, very focused on having the app be very sophisticated. And that's going to, I think, really help a lot of consumers once they kind of buy operating what is kind of what feels to me like, I guess, being relatively new to smart energy in a way, what seems very sophisticated. I have a buddy who works in DC and is a building engineer, and he does all the energy and HVAC stuff for like big high rises. And I was talking to him about smart energy coming to the home, and what he was asking me was, how are consumers going to be? How are they going to get from kind of where we are now, where we just generally understand solar panels are a good idea, to understanding how to like run a microgrid and like start to think a little bit more like a building engineer ourselves?
Yeah, it's a great question, and something near and dear to me, coming from as an educator at the university, merging into this world of really making an effort to raise the level of energy literacy across the globe. Right? You think about when computers first came in and no one knew what they were doing, and in a matter of a decade, everyone from a 3-year-old to a 93-year-old was computer literate, and we have to achieve that same level of proficiency in the energy space. But many would argue it might even be a more challenging task. But so two fronts. One is that education is super important, educating consumers, electricians, architects, builders, across the board. And so we put a lot of effort into education and training, and then we feed that into our user experience and the tools that we've made for electricians to install this work and to install these systems so that they're as intuitive and familiar as possible. And one thing that I notice quite often is that there's some consumers who purchase our products who are really into this, right? They're the techies. They want to dig in and look at historical data and compare it to their solar and look at maybe we have a lot of stuff on load health of different devices, and they're right in the weeds. And then we have other consumers who they just want the lights on. They don't want to see it. They just want to look at it and know that things are going okay. And often these two consumers live in the same house. And so our challenge is to create an experience that gives you at a glance what's going on, but allows another consumer, or even a property manager, a building manager, a community manager, to really dive deep into the weeds. But with that, it's always a struggle, or I should say a challenge, to add that education piece in along the way.
Yeah, that's great. That's it. So this is a great note to end on. Anna, it was great talking to you. I have a million questions for you about EVs that I hope you can join in the Zoom call later, so I can pepper you with those. If the rest of the audience, you know what, I'll defer to everyone else who's not me. But if people are quiet, I will ask you a lot of EV questions. So I appreciate your time here. Thank you so much for sharing everything that Savant Power is doing. And now we're going to go to a little break, and then my boss, Elizabeth Parks, is going to come in here for executive Q&A. Thank you.
Ready. Welcome back, and thank you, Anna, for that awesome presentation, sharing more about what Savant Power is working on. And certainly interesting to see all of the pieces of the connected home space that Savant's working on. I'm Elizabeth Parks, and the president of Parks Associates, and excited now to introduce our next speaker, Ansel Rajaharia, Director of Connected Products and Surge Home Electric from Schneider Home Electric. Schneider Electric has entered the residential market in a huge way this year, and with really strong messaging around energy savings and energy efficiency for all of the work it's doing. We're going to spend about half an hour to talk about factors driving change, the role of the consumer in technology, and finally, what's to come as we look forward in the coming months and years. Just a reminder to please send any questions into the chat and we'll weave them into our conversation. We also should have a few minutes at the end to take questions. And so now I'd like to jump right in and invite Ansel to join our virtual stage. Thanks for being here, and let's go ahead and start out and get a quick introduction of your role and some of the things that Schneider Electric is working on.
Yeah, absolutely, Elizabeth, and thanks for, firstly, can you guys hear me clearly?
Yep, you sound great.
All right. Again, Elizabeth, thanks for having me. Really excited to talk about what Schneider is doing in the space. Just a quick background about myself. So I am part of the residential business line, and I lead our connected products both for residential and light commercial. And as you probably mentioned, that I think Schneider, again, we've been very focused on building our electrical panels and have 40% market share. But now with this energy landscape changing and solar and battery becoming almost extremely common in household, how can we evolve our solutions to make customers' life more resilient and efficient?
Awesome, that's great. Well, so let's jump into the conversation here. I want to start off looking at some of the factors that are driving change. Schneider Electric is making a huge push with a new platform in the residential space, and so certainly, know your strategic team is looking at what factors are impacting the market and really, looking at driving growth. So if you can run through a few of those from your view, that would be great.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And I think thanks for putting this up. And a lot of it, Anna actually mentioned in a previous meeting. So really, there are 4 factors that we see that's really driving the change. One is around what we call around sustainability, right? So we have government, states, etc., figuring out how do we cut emissions, and home today make up 20% of the CO2 emissions today. The second factor is on resilience. There are power outages happening at different states. Last week, in fact, with the rain happening in Bay Area, my brother, he lost power for like few days. So it's real, and I think it's not just California, Texas today. Northeast Boston is facing outages. So it's becoming more and more common, and people are becoming more and more aware of it. The third piece is the cost of electricity, right? So electricity cost is going up. One is because of more people are working from home, and as a result, there is a higher demand for electricity. But also there's electrification happening. So we have new loads like the EVs, etc., that is getting added, and that is significantly driving the cost of the electricity. So when you look at all these 3 different factors, 4 factors, and bring them together, you realize that there's a lot of, I would say, potential for a company like Schneider to come in and really help consumers, utilities, and our commercial facility managers to reduce the cost of the electricity and really make it much more efficient and a safer place to be in.
Well, and certainly consumers do look to that cost savings as one of the driving factors for, getting a smart thermostat or opting into certain utility programs. I want to touch upon a little bit of what you said there in terms of the regulatory environment, and specifically looking at some of the things that builders are now doing within certain state regulations like California, and where that may show up next. And then also, if you could provide a little perspective on the federal government and the role that they're going to play, in the coming years in driving interest and awareness of energy management solutions.
Yeah, absolutely right. So, starting with the federal government, we have the federal tax rebate for solar. It started at 30%. Now it's slowly trickling down. I think right now it's around 26%. And I think that is a big factor in the adoption of different technologies, right? So if I'm a consumer and I'm getting roughly 26% back in tax rebate, that makes it a very strong incentive for me to put in solar. And so having these types of rebates as part of the overall, business plan really helps in reducing the total cost of ownership. And my payback can go down from, 20 years, and with the rebate, it can go as low as 10 years. So I think that having those rebates and financial incentives make a big difference. From the statewide, you talked about California, and definitely they are leading the front today. So there is something known as the California Title 24 ruling, and basically what that ruling states is that every new home that is built in California requires solar. So imagine now suddenly we are putting 70,000 homes every year that wouldn't have solar, now will have solar in it. And so the question then comes to us as companies and our builder partners on how do we make that happen in the most cost-effective way, right? So I think they really put the foot in the stand, California team, and said, how do we make this a mandatory play going forward? Usually other states follow that. So I think I would expect more and more states to follow maybe a portion of that and really drive renewable adoption down the road.
Sure. And I think also the home builders tend to, replicate what they may do in one state in another. They may just move their plans into those other states. Before we talk more about the consumer, I want to ask about, your big picture approach to solving the challenges around energy efficiency and resiliency.
Yeah, no. So I think, in Schneider, we believe that having a holistic approach, what we are calling the grid to plug approach, will really help in solving the energy challenges we described. And really the idea is to build solutions either by ourselves or with our partners like Savant and we have SolarEdge, Sense, all of these we see as very important partners as part of the ecosystem, is to bring this complete end-to-end solution to a customer. And so everything starts with what we call the grid piece, right? So Schneider today has 40% share in the residential space. And how do we take that electrical panel, which we believe is a spinal cord, because every electron that's flowing through your home has to go through the electrical panel. And so starting there, providing the control and visibility for the consumer in order to understand how do you drive better energy resources, and then going back to the plug level, which is your devices and dimmers and switches, and providing control from that perspective as well. So the idea is to give an end-to-end solution to a consumer, and depending upon the type of the load, a customer might decide how do you manage that. Parallelly, the idea is to work with different partners. So we partner with different inverter companies and generator, etc., to really bring those renewable resources as seamlessly as possible into the overall mix. So again, it's more looking at it more holistically and figuring out what are the different control points we have and how do we make it simpler and easier for an average consumer so that they don't have to about the energy use as much.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that perspective you're bringing with electricity being a backbone of the consumer experience. And as we heard Anna say earlier, electricity is like air. And in some earlier comments this week on LinkedIn, I heard somebody from Plume say broadband is like oxygen. And so when we put these two things together, electricity and broadband, we're setting the foundation now for those connected devices to really do something different than they've ever been able to do, that includes the exchange of data, includes the analytics, and then tied into the user interface where you really can potentially incentivize consumers to shift their behavior. And then also going further, have them be an active participant in that really shifting of the energy load on the grid, which is amazing to think about. And some of the things we've heard over the years is you take these individual home environments and little itsy bitsy bits of savings all around the home, and then extend it to the neighborhood and then to the city. You're really having this impact that is going to become really important as we move forward with the electrification of the grid. So let's talk a little bit more about the role of consumers and understanding energy management, energy efficiency, and devices. So do you think consumers truly understand what an energy efficient home is and how they can get one?
I think Anna described that we have different types of consumers today, right? So certain what we call power users, which I feel is a smaller fraction of the population today. I think they have an understanding of what energy efficiency is and how to bring that. But I would say bulk of the users or consumers today, they are not aware about, or frankly, they don't even much care about the energy use today. And so driving education, I think, is very important for our consumers. And so everything starts, if you know it, then only you can change it, right? So how do you get data that is easy for the consumers to understand so that they can better make decisions about energy use? And I think that is a very important next step, is getting the consumers educated. I think Bijli has done a great job, by making the utility bills easier to understand. And I think there are other ways in which, you can empower consumers through digital applications as well as easy to use interfaces for consumers to understand.
Yeah, and Bijli is doing a great job of that. I'm going to share some data a little bit later in the session coming, but our research shows that consumers report less than 10% participation in energy programs, which could be looked at as a negative or a real positive. I mean, a negative in the sense that it's not that much, but a positive in the sense of, wow, look how much we can move the needle and the big, huge opportunity that's in front. Schneider Electric, may not be a brand that consumers think of necessarily for, the control side. They think of it more on just electrical panels, maybe, or maybe they don't even think of Schneider Electric at all. So what are some of the things that you all are going to do to help build on that awareness that needs to happen with consumers?
Yeah, it's a multifold thing that we'll have to do to drive our awareness. I think part of the idea is working directly with our channel partners, whether it's electrical contractors, our low voltage installers, in helping us get that message back to the consumers. Secondly, it's working with our different builder partners, because I think they are the ones that are interacting with homeowners more often. And then lastly, we have this growing population of solar installers as well. So when we think of the different ways consumers learn about, their energy, I think this is how we can touch that. Additionally, we've made significant investments in the utility space as well, right? So, through our Schneider Ventures team, we've invested in AutoGrid, Uplight, and these are utility marketplaces and DER aggregators that touch on consumers. And so those are the other ways in which we are, reaching out and creating the brand awareness and ultimately delivering the value proposition of energy management to the end consumer.
That's great. And I love that you brought up the installers and the electricians, because that's a big area that Parks Associates looks at in our research, is in, the adoption of these products and how consumers are acquiring them. And it is pretty fragmented. And there's a real look from the industry on which professional service group is going to, maybe become one of the key players for the installation of smart home devices. We have the security dealers, we have the HVAC, we have the electricians, the plumbers, and also, the home contractors who do home improvements. So I think you all probably look to the electricians as that main piece for everything you're working on. But do you see these other channels playing a big role in the future?
No, we do. We definitely do. I mean, obviously today, electrician is our primary channel. However, we expect that to change and not just change, but also converge, right? So we are seeing a lot of, I would say, electricians having low voltage capabilities and vice versa, right? So I think there will be some convergence happenings. Similarly, even in the solar side, we see multiple electrical contractors having the capability to do solar as well. And so I expect some level of convergence happening down the road. And, as our product expands, right? So we recently launched our wiring devices solution. And we recently are also kind of working on the partnership with Savant we mentioned. So we expect to work with new channel partners to bring that to the end consumer in the most feasible way.
That's great. Before we get into talking about the role of technology, I wanted to see if you can expand a little bit more on the things that you're doing beyond just the platform, even the packaging and the presentation and sort of your supply chain along the way, and the steps that Schneider Electric is taking in really looking at all recyclable materials. I'll let you share more on that.
Yeah, so we follow something known as the green premium. Again, Schneider, our sustainability is a key driver for us. In fact, we were rated the #1 sustainable company by Corporate Knights. So we ensure, that we work on sustainability on multiple angles, starting with our partners, with our customers, and with our employees. And we make sure that at every point of step, we keep sustainability at the forefront. And obviously, with the given supply chain crisis that has happened, all companies have been impacted. And so the question then becomes is how do we build the right capacity and diversify our ability to have new, I would say, vendors in order to meet those demands. So it's definitely, I think COVID has helped us to digitize faster like any other company, and also made sure that we don't compromise on sustainability, which is our #1 priority as a company's mission.
Great, and congratulations on that recognition as the #1 company in the world. That's
Yep.
really amazing. So kudos to your team.
Thank you.
Let's move on to technology, and I want to hone in on sensors. So we're seeing sensors everywhere. Sensors in your car, sensors in your refrigerator, sensors in your garage door. So tell me, what is the role of these sensors, and how does this make everything happen?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. In fact, there's a sensor in my toothbrush also today, so that's a different question. But ultimately, sensors are nothing but data collection tools, right? So what sensor typically does is that it's collecting data and it's pushing to the cloud, and then you can have algorithm built in either at the edge level or at the cloud level. And so ultimately, the more data you have and the better your AI and your machine learning algorithms are, the more better decisions you can make down the road, right? So, as an example, I'll give you is the company that we've partnered with, Sense, right? So they are a energy monitoring company, and what they've done is that they are collecting data from your electrical panels and simply using the sine waves and how the sort of the waves platform is, it's able to determine what is really using your energy. And so something that we couldn't have imagined, that how do you take your electrical bill and really understand what you do about it. Now with this technology, you really know what is consuming your load and where do you need to take action. So that's the real power of sensors, is translating information into actionable data and then having the right level of machine learning and AI built into it to really make sure that whatever actions it gives is something usable for the consumers.
And this can be proactive, but it can also be predictive as well, right?
Yep, it's a combination of both, right? I mean, ultimately, we want to move from a break fix model where people are fixing things after it's broken to more of a proactive model where when something is about to break. Something similar to what cars have today in the form of engine light, right? So you don't have to wait for an oil change for the car to break. You know that you require an oil change. How do you apply the similar logic for different parts in your home?
Okay, great. And the value of those sensors becomes a lot greater when there's a capability of integration or perhaps an open platform that allows for a lot of different devices or brands to be connected. So, can you share a little bit more about Schneider Electric's view on open versus closed? And then also, would love to hear any comments on the Matter initiative, a huge initiative by many players in the space, really looking to bring companies together with the ultimate in mind, the consumer and the experience with mass market growth behind all that.
Yeah, so Schneider is an advocate of open protocol. So that's the sort of the mantra that we are moving forward with. And we recently announced that all our products and devices will have or will be compatible with Matter. And so this helps to make sure that our technology can work with other technology. We have the right level of certification, as well as it integrates with other platforms on Matter. So we really believe that having this open API and collaborating with other technologies would really help in driving the highest adoption and also bringing the highest value back to the consumers.
And then adding in the ability to deliver that data and information back to the consumer. How do you think this is best done? Is it through the analytics on the smartphone? Is it through the daily alerts that an energy provider might make, or is it a combination?
Yeah, today everyone has a smartphone, right? So I think having the ability to see the data on the smartphone really helps. I think over time, you want the technology to almost disappear, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the best technology is sometimes which is not visible. And so even to a great extent, having the utilities either send emails or the emails coming through from us, I think even that will be a great way to engage customer. But the idea is to engage customers only when it's needed, right? And the more things happen automated behind the scenes, I think the better the experience is on the consumer, because today every consumer is so busy that that's one less thing they will have to care about if things are automatically happening in the back end.
Sure, yeah, that automation is really important. And we've had many conversations over the years at Smart Energy Summit about consumer engagement and whether we really even want consumers to have to be engaged, and I think Mike from Constellation has brought this point up several times at our events of, that's always been our goal, but don't we really just want all of this happening in the background and consumers shifting their behaviors and things happening where engagement actually isn't required as a result of all the technology that is enabling things to happen. So it's definitely an interesting question there. Let's shift here. We have about 8 more minutes to talk. So if you have any questions for Ansel, please be sure to put them in the chat. But let's talk about some of the key partnerships that you have announced and any that you might be able to share that are coming or in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I mentioned some of them during the initial piece, but so we have a couple of different partnerships going on. I think we talked about Savant, so very excited to partner with them and bring their, the RacePoint modules that Anna mentioned into our panels, right? So I think that's a big partnership we are super proud of. The other one is a partnership with Sense. So again, Sense is a technology partner for us, and we really see their energy monitoring and disaggregation technology as a forefront. And so we've kind of brought that technology in through a Visor solution, and further plan to expand that in our residential products. And the last piece is the partnership we announced with SolarEdge. So again, SolarEdge, they are one of the leaders in the inverter space. And so the smart panel which we are launching, the Energy Center, the idea is how do you make it very compatible with inverters so that the solution becomes as plug and play as possible. So these are the different partnerships that we are doing, and you will see there are certain trends, right? So some is on the digital side, some is on the hardware side, and then I mentioned that some is on the utility sides with Uplight and AutoGrid. And so the idea is, as we look the entire energy space, we see where are the gaps that Schneider, will probably more benefit by having a partner. and really identifying who are the right players in that mix that have the same vision and have the same values. And then we sort of work with them to bring the best overall solution for the customer.
Okay, great. And I love that you brought up EVs. That's certainly a big part of the conversation here. So our data shows that currently 7% of broadband households have an electric vehicle. And I heard a data point the other day that 16% of new cars are electric vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you think that growth is going to occur? We also have smart thermostats sitting at 11 to 13% adoption for the past few years. Not a lot happening there.
Yeah, I think, with EVs, I mean, if you look at the big auto OEMs, right, whether it's Ford, GM, all of these ones, I mean, they have said that they will go all electric at different time frame, right? I think Ford was 2030, GM is 2040. So clearly you can see that as these auto OEMs transition, this is not a one-time thing, but to me, it's a long-term thing, right? And so when you add an EV to your home, you're increasing your electrical usage by almost 60 to 70%. So that's a significant load on your home. And your ability to manage that and your ability to drive efficiency with that will really help you understand the overall cost of it. And I think you can imagine the capacity constraints the grid will have once you have so many EVs on it. And so I think that becomes the other key component is as EVs increase and the constraint goes up, how do you, create that level of, let's say, efficiency to make sure that it doesn't result in a grid overload?
Yeah, really interesting. And it brings to mind managed services that are going on in the broadband space, right? We have a lot of companies who are looking to, control that broadband speed and where it's going in the home. And interesting that the utility service side has got something like that going on with these demand response types of programs, something that we're going to really dive in deeper in our afternoon sessions. Ansel, I want to give you a chance to say some final closing thoughts on the future of energy management in the home. I also want to thank you for your time and joining us today, but I'll let you close out with final words.
Absolutely, Elizabeth. Firstly, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you and just listening to all these speakers. I think the key is that it's a growing space. It's a very, I would say, unattended space so far. And I think the time is right now. There are a lot of factors, government, the cost of technology, the weather events that's making the awareness among consumers as a highest priority. And, companies, whether it's Schneider or other companies, we really see this as the future. And so I think, having the right technology with the right partners will really determine how this space evolves. So those are my closing comments.
Thank you so much. And again, we really appreciate your time and your insights. And of course, we look forward to bringing you back again next year to our virtual or in-person events. And so thank you again for being here. And we will be right back with our interactive panel session. So stick with us, and thanks again for joining.
The Connected Consumer.
Our mission is to make life greener, safer for consumers, for people, and greener is a big part of that. The company really focuses a lot of attention on climate change, and that not only in our operations but also in the technology that we develop. A lot of it is really used across a bunch of different sectors to help reduce climate change.
For the past 3 years, about 1/3 of broadband households have made energy-saving home improvements each year.
And so we're seeing a lot of activity in the smart building space to make those systems smarter, to deliver the right cooling and heating and airflow for people, but to use sensing to make that better than it has been in the past. We've all been in commercial buildings where it's clear the building just doesn't know we're there, right? Or doesn't know what the temperature is. It's a common frustration. And I'm happy to say that with the new technologies coming out, a lot of those problems are going to be solved.
Can you talk about how they're involved? You guys are involved in the production of clean electricity that's going to be powering our electric vehicles in the future?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a super exciting space. And like I said, that's a big part of the overall energy consumption. So almost 12% of, or the greenhouse gas emissions, almost 12% globally are from vehicles. We work with many of the big automakers. We're one of the biggest suppliers in the auto industry. Many of these companies are intending to introduce a lot of new electric vehicles. It takes them years to introduce new models, and so we're often working with them on products, their new vehicles that'll come out in a few years, and across the board, tremendous number of new models that will be electric vehicles over the course of the next few years.
I'm back. That was me promoting my podcast a second ago too. Me and Rosie, come please listen to us. All right, so we're back with a panel. We have a whole bunch of different experts from different leaders and people in different parts of the space, from solar to utilities to device manufacturers. So I'm really excited about this panel. We're going to get a lot of different interesting perspectives. So we want to bring them in one by one, give them a chance to introduce themselves. First, we're going to hear from Stephen Douglas. Steve, you want to?
Thanks, Chris, and hi, everyone. I'm Steve Douglas. I head up market strategy and 5G strategy for Sparent Communications. So Sparent is a leader in the test and assurance space for the communications industry. So what does that mean? Well, pretty much every device network you connect to, we help test and guarantee that they deliver on the relevant service quality, performance, and security. And we're a global company. We're headquartered actually here in the UK, where I'm based in London, but we have offices all around the world, East, West Coast US, working very closely with the whole communications sector.
All right, thank you, Steve. Brett, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Brett Lasher here from Cox Communications. For those of you who don't know Cox, we're the largest privately held telecom in the US. And the third largest MSO behind Charter and Comcast. I lead our smart resources innovation within our new growth and development group. So all of our kind of new organic growth initiatives around energy. Two big areas of focus, which will be relevant to our panel today. One, around energy management, and in particular, home energy management. And kind of our play there is combining, home energy management with home automation to drive engagement, layer on optimization to save money, and then kind of layer on what we're talking about with next gen products and services to really kind of provide a single pane of glass for the consumer to manage their energy and their home. And we can talk more about that in the session. On the other side of the page, we're also working in the smart grid space, in particular around outage detection. Utilities, even with smart meters, have a difficult time understanding power outages on their grid, and especially the quality of the power on the grid. Cable TV providers are kind of unique in that we have a commercial distributed infrastructure with backup power and a modem at all of our cable nodes. And so we can leverage that infrastructure and ping that every minute to determine whether or not the power is on or off, and the quality of that power. And then combined, we're actually rolling up this data in consortium with Cable Labs. Cox and Comcast are two of the early adopters here. And so we have a kind of a regional or sometimes national view of the grid, and can serve all sorts of types of customers. So utilities or enterprises are some of our early customers for this data, but you can see how this could also be leveraged for consumer or home-based applications as well.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to hearing more from you. Now, Peter, would you like to introduce yourself next? Hi, Peter.
Hi, everyone. My name is Peter Matthews. I'm the general manager for SolarEdge here in North America. A little bit about SolarEdge. We're the world's leader in solar inverters, more than 25 gigawatts of systems out there. More than 2 million monitored sites. Our products are in over 133 countries. More than half of the US homes that generate their own power today with solar use our products. About 2,500 U.S. solar installers today use our products. Worldwide, more than 10,000 solar installers use SolarEdge. And what we do is we deliver complete smart energy solutions for homes and businesses. That includes inverters, power optimizers, home EV charging, and most recently batteries for backing up your power. And we also do what are called grid services and virtual power plants that enable people to basically share the power in local territories. SolarEdge is publicly traded on the NASDAQ, and we also partner with utilities on customer incentive programs that help support both a stronger grid and adoption of storage and solar. And thanks for having me today.
All right, thank you, Peter. Wani, introduce yourself next, please. Hello.
Wani, and just, we do hard work. Everything we do is very for customers. Typically, MSO acts as a customer with MDU, so do a lot of QS and Chris. A little bit more. Sorry about that. I think in terms of here, those days, and I think a lot of that is sort of the hard work at than doing stuff like that. But the fence is we actually place for solutions, whether it's doing opportunities for in disposition.
That's us. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Wani. Mike Phillips.
Hi there. I'm Mike Phillips. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Sense. We're based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And because of the slide, we're very focused on how to provide consumer-facing intelligence for the home. We do this today with, you see that little orange box on the left there. What we realize is to engage consumers around energy, a couple things. One is we have to make it real time. We find that to get people to open up an app and see what's going on, they have to do it. It's got to be a real-time application, and it's got to be detailed. Letting them know that their toaster just turned on or the microwave just turned on, and seeing that happen in real time is super important. So how we do that, if you look at the upper right there, we do it today with a behind-the-meter piece of hardware using a utility terminology around behind the meter. Little orange box goes inside the electrical panel, measures the power in a crazy detailed way. We measure up to a million times a second the power, and we're making use of the fact that different things in your home use power slightly differently. And with machine learning, we're able to increasingly see what's going on in the home just from those power signatures. So that's kind of the technical underpinnings of providing this detailed real-time experience for consumers without having to wait for everything in your home to be instrumented. And then the important thing that is happening now, we're in this transition now where this is getting built into the infrastructure of homes. We've always realized that getting kind of consumers to install a little box inside the electrical panel is not going to get to market at the scale we want. We've got to get built into the infrastructure. So as you heard in the previous discussion, we're working closely with Schneider Electric, who's building our capabilities and applications into their panels, with the Energy Center shown there on the bottom right. And also we are now working with utility meter makers to put this kind of processing in their meters just as software. AMI meters were already doing digital sampling of power, already had edge computing, already had networking. They just were not good enough to run something like Sense. But now they are with the new Landis & Gyr Revelo meter. We are just software there now, no additional hardware in the house. And then finally, we are at this intersection of energy on one side that we've been talking about, and all the smart home world on the other side. So for things like control and automation, it's through API integrations with all the devices in the home. And things like I saw in the previous discussion, it's been a challenge on the integration side, but now with things like Matter, we think this is going to take off in a big way, where we have lots of connectivity for the devices in the home. So that's us in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. And last but not least, Courtney, welcome aboard. Hello.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Chris. My name is Courtney Thier. I'm the Director of Enterprise Solutions at Elevation. I have been in the energy monitoring and application space for the past 7 years. I've overseen many different projects that range from hardware controls, software automation, IoT, smart home integration. Also have seen lots of changes in our market, as a lot of our partners have mentioned. So at Elevation, we focus on residential energy solutions for homeowners, utilities, and some of the nation's largest landlords. Our solutions include solar. We have a proprietary energy monitoring technology, Curb, which is similar to a Sense device, energy efficiency upgrades, and other smart home advancements. So thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to our discussion.
That's great. Yeah, I have a bunch of questions for everyone on the panel, but I want to remind the audience also that we are looking to get you involved. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I also have some poll questions in there. So if you would go over to the polls tab and answer those, I can ask the panelists to comment on those later. But first, I want to talk about a tech advancement that we've been looking at for a little while now, and just wondering when is the major impact coming. 5G. Now, what is the impact of 5G going to be? It's a major question. IoT is super interested in, but in this particular space, what are we thinking for 5G in the utility markets? Ms. Courtney, would you answer that one for us?
Sure. So this is a common theme that we've heard today, but I really see the impact as boiling down to access and availability. So 5G has the potential to substantially improve the value proposition of the entire smart home market for its consumers. There have been many issues that we've seen today and that we've even mentioned today in this space when it comes to a fragmented smart home market. There's lack of connectivity between the different devices that are available today, unreliable communication, maybe there's changing passwords for Wi-Fi that's causing some issues, or routers in the home that might be blocking communication. So I think 5G gives utilities the opportunity to build strong platforms that they can rely on for their grid developments. And in addition, cell that we've seen for a communication platform has been really expensive. If you look at the hardware and data plans, and a lot of the smart home space has used this before, but 5G also has a potential to lower these costs and even replace Wi-Fi networks in the future. So all of these changes allow for utilities to take advantage of connected solutions for their customers, build out these smart home platforms, and use real-time data to engage customers in a new way, and in turn create some resiliency opportunities for the grid as well. So I believe it'll still take time. We're getting better in this market and alleviating some of the barriers that I've mentioned, but we do still have some time before I think the marketplace is more accessible and less fragmented when the Alexas and the Google Homes of the world communicate with each other. So given the advancement and opportunity of 5G, utilities can take full advantage of these devices that residents would like to use, bring down the costs, and deploy more connected devices to these communities. So I see a pretty large impact and opportunity.
Yeah, that sounds great. And Steve, when we were talking about this before, you had a little different angle in terms of what the utility is going to be doing with oil and gas and 5G. Can you share that with the audience for us?
Yeah, I mean, just a slightly different perspective is really more on the supply side themselves, right, before it even gets to the home. And what we're seeing at the moment is specifically in the oil and gas sector, a huge opportunity for value creation with 5G, both in the up, mid, and downstream value chain. And that could unlock about, I think it's $75 billion of value is estimated by the industry, and that value would then get transferred obviously down into the consumer market. Now, there's four sort of key areas within the oil and gas sector where they're looking at 5G today. You have process monitoring and control, where they're basically instrumenting their environments with huge dense arrays of sensors, high definition video, all using the ultra fast 5G uplink connections to really enable real-time monitoring and control of their supply side. You're seeing smart maintenance activities starting to be used, where they're again utilizing 5G technology for augmented reality to help them quickly identify trouble components and outages. Robotic operations, a really exciting one. Again, using 5G for to enable semi or fully autonomous systems for unmanned operations across their facilities, and even exploring that ubiquitous 5G connectivity from their upstream and downstream processes right out into the home, where you'd have 5G connectivity yourselves. And I think these types of 5G enabled capabilities are seen a way as to increase the savings, efficiencies, and costs of their production side, which would then get transferred onto the supply side. And just to give you one real world example of this, at the Shengli oil fields in China, where they're engaging in oil and gas exploration today, they implemented a 5G private network for the remote well monitoring and control to enhance productivity and reduce maintenance costs. And the way they did that was a range of wireless sensors, actuators, cameras, instrumenting those well sites to allow the remote management of them, intelligently starting, stopping low output, low productivity wells to optimize their efficiency. And basically from an infrastructure build out for them, that was one cell site, a 5G cell site to cover over 2 kilometers with about 200 plus well sites. And the savings from that there, which are now being transferred down onto the consumer market, are huge. So you can sort of now imagine that, the net benefits of combining the supply side efficiencies with the demand side from the home side, and if we can intelligently link them closer together, it could be huge savings both from a cost perspective, but also potentially from an environmental perspective as well.
Right. Now, so I heard you mention the kind of numerous sensors that are going to be deployed more on the supply side, and Courtney was talking a bit about all the sort of different data gathering devices that we're going to have in our homes. Brett, did you have a perspective on how the utilities are going to be able to leverage all this data coming in from all these different sources?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we just need to establish kind of what 5G is expected to bring. So, 5G itself is expected to bring lower latencies, higher bandwidth, more reliability, and most importantly, the ability to connect many more devices to kind of a given radio or a gateway. And so with that in mind, I think Courtney did a really good job laying out some of the benefits to utilities for home energy management. I think if you start branching out from there, there's a couple other really interesting areas to pay attention to, most notably around DER. And so as DER grows, you're going to have hundreds and thousands and hopefully millions of distributed resources that the utility needs to monitor and net meter. And so 5G will greatly help facilitate that flow of information. And then the other piece is from a private network perspective. A lot of 5G will help facilitate some of these private networks for utilities, which will enable them to consolidate a lot of their disparate networks today, have more reliable and secure networks, and allow them to kind of instrument the networks more granularly and provide the benefits from that instrumentation to consumers.
Right. So now we've seen a couple of different sources, but I feel like the one piece that we're missing here is the kind of SMB customer and how they're going to be involved, not so much with 5G, but just in general in terms of how they're going to be using devices for energy data monitoring. Wani, can you speak on that for us?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of focus. And can you guys hear me okay? I know there was having some issues.
Yeah, you sound great now.
All right, good. Our focus is just actually, providing solutions for, retailers, quick serve restaurants, but we do a lot around hospitality and MDU. And I think when you actually look at, let's say, the real estate space around MDU, that's a huge asset base, right? There's just tons and tons of that, all over the country, all over the world. And historically, a lot of these companies are aggregated, right, through REITs or different property management companies and things like that. And a lot of their technology focus has been around access, lighting, security, things like that. And I think what we're seeing now is that, with companies like Latch and SmartRent going public and also looking to, generate more recurring revenue, and also mandates from, for sustainability, like if you look at like Blackstone, for example, there's a lot of push for like, what can you do very quickly to make an impact? And I think, like we've kind of gone through this phase one, which is really, let's throw some smart thermostats out there. Let's do some demand response. Let's get some data and analytics and turn it into something meaningful. But now I think what I'm seeing is a lot of these larger companies basically saying, hey, we have our own internal, almost like an RPS score, right? Like a renewable portfolio standards, meaning like 50% of our consumption needs to be from renewables. And how can we actually, through technology, bring that solution to life? And so, for us, I think that's a big opportunity. Everyone's looking for it. And I'd say that it's somewhat nascent, but there's probably a lot of work we can do to actually support that. So that's a little bit of it. And again, devices, software, services all really help drive that.
All right. Now, so you mentioned kind of a report for the utility side. Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about how kind of the utility side versus the customer side is going to be different in terms of the type of reporting that they're looking at in terms of energy usage?
Well, look, I think it's really important to realize that they interact. Separating consumer from utility is not necessarily the right way to look at it, because in previous discussions, a previous session, there was some talk about, gee, can we even get consumers engaged around energy? Our view is you have to, because consumers do have a big impact in how their homes work and how energy works in their homes. And I'm not talking about remembering to turn off the lights or whatever. It's more like making sure you don't have these unknown energy hogs in your home, making sure you have the appropriate maintenance on your HVAC, or there's not something like your well pump is broken and leaking water and using energy all the time. So the consumer involvement in how energy is used in their home is just there and not going away. So our view is we've got to engage the consumers around that, help them make their homes better, but in ways that work well with the utilities and satisfy the needs of the utility programs, which are either energy efficiency is clear for all of us, and it's increasingly becoming important, as we all know, not just how much energy you use, but when you use it. So this is, again, where you need consumers involved, because you want consumers not to have to worry about the details. We don't think the consumer should have to worry about when they can run their dishwasher. However, we think that to the extent we can automate things in your home, like automate your EV charging, automate your hot water heater, and so on, this is where we're going to get the demand flexibility that we need and the utilities need. And we do that by getting engaged consumers who trust that we can help them do the right thing, save money, save energy, and manage the systems in their homes.
Yeah, for sure. And so you mentioned EVs in there, and this general lift in terms of how much energy consumers are going to be using. We also know that prices are super high for energy in Europe, but still low in the United States. If that changes, that's going to have a big impact. But also, as consumption goes up, especially from EVs, Anna put a number out there earlier saying EVs are going to add 60 to 65% of additional pull on the grid. So with costs going up and demand going up like that, how is that going to look? Maybe Peter, can you talk a little bit about, what is the impact of this more devices drawing more power, and especially EVs as kind of a big power pull?
Yeah, I think, from the consumer side, first of all, controlling the energy in your home is key. Having data about what's going on in your home, and then controlling cost. Yeah, we hear lots of stories about prices going up, and certainly over time, the cost of power from utilities, goes up 3 to 5% a year in a good year, and higher in a bad year. So there's obviously been a huge trend for people to make and consume their own power through solar, and so that's where we're involved in. And if you can make it with a renewable source, then everyone feels good about helping the greenhouse gas problem that the whole planet's struggling with. So here we enable consumers to both produce their own energy on their roof, and then control exactly how they use it. You can manage it, track it, do it through a smartphone app. The consumer can see their solar system, how much energy it's producing, and exactly what cost. And solar today is anywhere between the same cost from the utility to as much as 30 or 40% cheaper than what you can buy it from the utility from. So that's obviously a huge trend. Now, at the same time, solar is only on about 3 or 4% of the single-family homes in the U.S. So there's a huge amount of untapped demand that's out there, and the biggest trend today is adding batteries. So when you add a battery, you can then store the energy and use it when you want to use it. There's good times during the day to use it, depending on what your utility bill is, and certainly with power outages and the need for home backup, being able to store your own energy is becoming really mission critical for the typical home, and it's happening on the coasts first due to storms, and in the west due to wildfires. So controlling your energy, producing your own energy, and then being able to monitor it in real time, through the convenience of a smartphone app is a huge trend. And this all ties back to utilities because, producing your own energy, be it on a home or a business, is becoming very important for utilities, because if they can participate in that by utilizing through what are called virtual power plants. So basically the utility is directly connected to your system, and you're given an incentive by the utility to, for example, dispatch a battery during a hot summer month when normally they would fire up a natural gas power plant. They can avoid that by dispatching batteries that are on people's homes. So that's a big trend. Utilities all around the country are starting programs around these virtual power plants, and that's a big part of our business today, which is to enable those utilities to talk directly to those systems and essentially control them with the push of a button.
Yeah, so you covered a lot of great topics there in terms of new innovations and technology trends that are occurring, more devices that are coming to the home, and also looking forward to the future. As you mentioned, penetration by solar PV is still kind of low, but is for sure ramping up. As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, the intention is there, especially among young consumers who are going to be buying homes in the next 5 and 10 years, and realistically, very seriously thinking about putting solar on there. So another thing you mentioned there was demand response, and I know that kind of behind the scenes, there's a lot of really smart software making that work. Before it gets to the consumer in terms of AI, machine learning, and things like that. Maybe Mike, could you talk a little bit about how AI, machine learning, and other software advancements like that are going to be driving energy efficiency solutions here going forward?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we've been deep into AI at the low level. So how do we use device signals of energy in your home to figure out what devices are on and off and how much power they're using? But we are very much now moving up to the next levels of that to address exactly the things you're talking about. I mean, you mentioned energy efficiency. There's absolutely some opportunities to have AI and machine learning to figure out where are the real opportunities for energy efficiency in the home. But I think even the bigger opportunity is what Peter was just talking about, which is the demand flexibility we need, or demand response is the utility word for this, of when to use energy. It's going to start to have a bigger and bigger impact as there's more and more solar, more and more battery storage out there. Making a good decision about when to use energy is important. We just did a little study of EV charging throughout the US, and we found that in California in particular, if you let us control when EV charging is happening to find the minimum carbon intensity time for that, which is not the only factor to consider, but looking at just carbon intensity, we could save 40% of the carbon impact of charging a car. So that's just one example, but now as you extend it to the cost of energy, the constraints on the grid, and things like carbon intensity, it just gets very complicated. And therefore, we are firmly convinced that we can't just put all that burden on the consumers for them worrying about all the details. We also don't think the other extreme makes sense, where the consumer would give up control of the things in their home to their utility, for example. So we think there's a really good answer in between, which is automation, which runs on behalf of the consumer. So applications, whether we're providing or your car maker is providing, but applications running on behalf of the consumer that's taking all this information into account that Peter was just talking about, and then making good decisions about when is a good time to charge the car, run the dishwasher, heat the hot water. So that's the kind of AI that we are now moving to the next level of, based on this kind of core data we have, and bringing in all sorts of outside information to do that in a really good way.
That's great. Steve, could you handle that same question too, kind of from, coming from a different environment, being in Europe, maybe looking at a also more global footprint than some of our other panelists here?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI's got a huge role to play, whether it's in the prediction on the demand and the supply to handle peaks or surges, as Mike said, or even, in the supply side to deal with outages and predict them. I think there's another role it has to play within the home, and that's really even on the cybersecurity side of it. The more we have to instrument parts of the home to allow that automation, to allow that intelligence, we invite somewhat risk into the home environment through security. And I think AI has got a huge role as part of that as well, to help protect these systems. I think our energy supply is a natural source of attack going forward as we instrument it. And I think AI is a huge area to play within that. And I think the other thing we're seeing at the moment is, to Mike's point as well about AI being an enabler for that intelligent automation that's needed. The other area we're starting to see a lot of the industry talk about at the moment is how do we make AI trustworthy? In the essence, AI is a black box. It needs somewhat to be explainable. Humans like ourselves, we get nervous when we don't understand what the AI is doing. So getting that sort of visibility to the consumer is going to be critical. And I think once the consumer starts to better understand that the visibility that the AI can generate on the predicted, say, usage or power usage that they have, and how to optimize that, and then can see in near real time the actual, benefit of that, it will build that sort of trustworthiness in the AI and in the automation that can really drive the smart home.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, privacy is a big issue. Trust of all this technology is going to be really important. And that's something that everyone across all the areas that we study in connected devices broadly are going to be contending with in the future as we move forward. But I think my energy professors my business professors, thinking back, would be very upset if I didn't switch the focus a little bit. Innovation doesn't only come from technology. They would tell you also very important is business model changes and strategy changes. So Wani, I think you'd be a good person to answer this. Talk a little bit about changing business models in the space and how that's going to be bringing innovation alongside of all these tech advancements.
Yeah, I mean, I've been sort of in this energy world around efficiency, DR, curtailment, 15, 20 years now, right? And I think historically, a lot of it's been sort of coordinated between, the regulatory side of things or the utility side of things with I guess the customer. And I think what's changing a lot now is that, it's a little bit more complex because of like DER, things like EV coming onto the grid. And so there's an element of, rate design, I think, that needs to evolve fast, right? To just manage, consumption and demand and things like that. But then the flip side is like, I'll just keep, beating the sustainability drum, but, a lot of the companies that I'm dealing with, that I'm seeing in the space now, they're actually trading on the mandate of we are going to become more sustainable, whether it's like generating their own executing their own PPAs or working with service providers. And, I think the thing that with that adds is additional complexity, right? How do you report out to your investors or your employees or your customers, basically saying, we have this in hand, right? This is part of our model. And, I think for vendors like us coming in, what we try to do is create, again, simple solutions that allow them to get to sustainability. I mean, if the KPI is, hey, within 5 to 10 years, you're 100%, carbon neutral, how do you get there, right? And those are complex. It's easier for a company like a Facebook or an Amazon where they can actually, afford to do that and source that. But when you start talking about SMB or smaller customers and things like that, it's a lot tougher, right? But that's what we see. And, I think there's also really easy and good ways to monetize that, right? Both in terms of reducing the capital costs for the customers, but also companies like ours where you can actually, differentiate and monetize that mission. So.
Yeah, for sure. And, like I mentioned in my reporting earlier, we're definitely tracking kind of two different types of customers in terms of the green-driven customer and the cost-driven customers. I mean, everybody is sort of a cost-driven customer, but depending on how energy rates are, that kind of the two sides of the scale change. So there's definitely an interesting interaction between the energy kind of developers, manufacturers in this space trying to reach out to consumers and figuring out which of their motivations is kind of the stronger one, so they have the right lever to pull. So you also mentioned, Wani, municipalities doing different changes, a lot of like sort of societal changes occurring around the industry and how it's impacted. One of our poll questions here I have, what players will drive renewable energy adoption the most? And we see that right now the winner there is municipalities, with utilities coming in next. So those two forces are going to really both be kind of pushing their agenda. Sometimes they're going to be aligned, sometimes they won't be. But as all this technology is happening, as all these different forces are coming in, like changing energy prices in municipalities, maybe there's a giant infrastructure bill coming that has green initiatives in it. There's going to be opportunities and kind of a requirement almost for more partnerships, I think, in the space. So I was hoping, Brett, maybe you could talk a little bit about kind of what you see in terms of how our partnership is going to be kind of becoming more common and bigger going forward.
Yeah, for us, so kind of tying this back to the home energy space and your question about kind of business model, we believe kind of the historical business model of kind of a point solution in energy management is broken. It's not led to persistent engagement over time, and so we strongly believe that consumers, want the proverbial kind of single pane of glass to manage all of their different disparate uses. And so for us, that means kind of bringing in not only home energy management, but also home automation combined with home energy management to drive that engagement, and then have a kind of a single pane of glass where they can also look to engage in clean energy and kind of manage their home. And us as a traditional telecom provider can't do all of that. We can't be all things to all people. And so partnerships are kind of a big part of how we plan to go to market and build our solution. And so to date, we've formed partnerships in a number of arenas, in that kind of home management, home automation space, things like property insurance, home warranty, EV charging, virtual repair. So a lot of different ways to kind of build this single platform for a customer to kind of control their home and their energy usage. And we're doing a lot of that through partnership.
Great. Courtney, do you want to kind of speak to the same idea of partnerships?
Sure. So I like the statistic that the average resident spends about 9 minutes a year thinking of their electric provider and their utility bills. So that, to me, is a perfect example of how we need partnerships to better scale and make an impact in this space. And to continue with what some other panelists were mentioning today. So last summer, we ran a pilot with an Arizona utility and created a virtual power plant. So we use smart energy devices to shift energy outside of most expensive time of the day, those peak demand windows. And with the real-time data, and Mike mentioned this before, we can see how much and when exactly people are using energy. So that's creating partnership opportunities between these smart home device companies and utilities. So with the pilot that we ran last summer, we found that we can save around $30 a month off of electric bills without losing comfort in the home. So this shows the benefit of those partnerships and the opportunity to really elevate our solutions to not only save people money without losing comfort, but create these VPPs that make a connected system and even adds more resiliency to the grid. So as utility structures are changing, they're becoming more complicated, demand is increasing. I think these partnerships are essential and need to continue to be created. This is going to make a really big impact in the way people engage with their energy data and how smart home devices can change and optimize residential energy usage. And the other way that I see advancements in partnerships is this is allowing us to reach previously untapped markets as well that we didn't have the opportunity to work with before. So 30 to 40% of the population currently doesn't have access to energy efficiency or solar or even some of these smart home products because they're renters instead of homeowners. And at Elevation, we've also created a unique solution to work with landlords so that we can get energy efficiency, solar, smart home to these tenants that previously had limited access. So organizations that we're working with, such as SmartRent, who, they provide landlord solutions. We've become their trusted energy partner. So with our partnership there, we're able to scale together into a market that previously had limited to no access to any of this technology or these solutions. And when I tie back and think about 5G opportunities as well, I mentioned that tenants is a new market for us, but there's a need for 5G in connectivity there because residents are also moving in and out in the renter space, and we need to make sure our devices are still connected. So all of these questions really tie together, and I think it's a really great example of what we can accomplish and the partnerships that we need. So these strategic partnerships will continue to grow and allow us to scale to markets that are not even on our radar quite yet.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's awesome that you brought up MDUs. I have kind of a million questions now in my head because that's something we're looking at so much more as the smart home buyer increasingly is MDU resident, and manufacturers are working on new ways to get devices that people can install and kind of take out and take with them, and making all sorts of plans for that going forward as people are starting to rebuy some of the smart products or looking to upgrade, and we're looking at second and third smart devices that need to be taken down and reinstalled and things like that. So this upgrade mode is really interesting. So I'm going to come back to that in a second. But first, I wanted to check with Peter on this partnerships idea, just because the solar business is so kind of tied to, first of all, utilities, but also kind of pointing customers at incentives that they can get from the government. So I wanted to make sure I got your perspective on this also.
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. has 3,300 utilities, so it's a very challenging approach. Most other countries have very, very few utilities that operate. Here we have basically 3,300 different perspectives on renewable energy and partnerships. And utilities over time are starting to move away from being kind of hostile towards people producing their own energy to embracing it. And utilities that partner with consumers are starting now by having the consumers that can allow their systems to basically benefit them personally and then the utility in general. And so there are many active programs now that allow you to get incentives around purchasing batteries for your home, smart EV chargers, solar inverters, and even water heaters. And some of these programs, like for example, National Grid in New England, Eversource, also in New England, APS in Arizona has just announced a big program to push consumers to put batteries in their homes. Green Mountain Power up in Vermont, SMUD in Sacramento, HECO in Hawaii, and Excel in Colorado, all have great consumer-facing programs that are encouraging their customers to produce their own energy and do good things for the grid. I think a great example where customers and utilities partner is this National Grid program. It's called Connected Solutions, and the utilities' goal is actually to improve how efficiently energy is transported through the wires, right? That run down the street. So if you can improve the efficiency by changing some very complicated things around the frequency and the harmonics of the power, you can actually improve the efficiency of centrally and avoid the cost for the utility to have to go out and do it directly. And so National Grid, they pay consumers an upfront incentive and then ongoing an incentive to use their inverter to improve what's called the power factor on the grid. And so individual customers, as well as large fleet owners like Sunnova and Sunrun, have assets in this program. And then our company, SolarEdge, we manage those communications. We control all the aspects of the program. And we set the settings in each individual home, and then we provide all the data back to the utility to make sure it's growing. And this is just one example. There are a lot of utilities that are now pursuing this kind of program called basically a virtual power plant and grid services. And I think with utilities really adopting and promoting home generation, we're going to see a dramatic shift in that in that 5% today, growing to 20, 30, 40%, which is really what we're going to need to, tackle the global warming problem, through power generated by utilities. So, thank you.
Yeah. So Peter said the magic words, global warming. So Wani, I want to make sure I can throw to you here and get your perspective on this a little bit, but also kind of ask you from your perspective, which is looking a little bit less at kind of energy savings, or I'm sorry, energy efficient for like cost savings and more environmental impact. What is the next? What do you think about the new wave of energy products coming to the home? So, for example, like smart appliances, we've been watching on our side to kind of see when those are going to take off, and appliances certainly have an impact on power consumption in the home. And we've been looking to see different manufacturers come into space and make some innovations there. So that's something that we watch a lot. But I'm curious to know. So both in terms of what partnerships do you see coming, but also what is the next wave of products coming that are going to be more energy efficient and also kind of from an environmental standpoint more favorable.
I think there's a couple things. I'd say, in terms of impact, one of the things that's really interesting is, I don't know if you all saw the announcement a couple of weeks ago from Google Nest in terms of Renew. And I think that, for example, is a really interesting product for me because, the underpinning of it and some of the technology that's coming in from it is, and I'll give it a plug because, they're a great partner and friend to us, is WattTime, right, from the Rocky Mountain Institute. And, the thing about that is it gives, just about anybody the ability to tap into, what's the intensity of renewables on the grid in the US, Canada, and I think other parts of the world where in real time, right? And it actually is another layer of logic and intelligence around load curtailment, demand response, things like that. And it also allows a large customer to say, I have a path now to get to, carbon neutrality faster, or at least show performance year over year where we're actually improving, especially if there's a scorecard. So, I think there's technology like that. A lot of it's data, and the work to actually integrate with the ISOs and the RTOs in the country to get a sense for like what that mix is. That just hasn't really existed, right? And now you can actually take that into scale. So that's one piece of it. I think in terms of like the other side of things, it's tricky, right? And I don't really have like a position on it, but when you start talking about EV batteries and things like that, I think when you look at the complete supply chain, like I think we just need to get a better sense for like what is the actual net impact around sustainability, because the supply chain piece is a little bit more, I think it's a little bit more hazy, right, in terms of what that true impact is. But I mean, when you're talking about appliances, devices, and things like that, obviously the actual end use of it has become much more impactful. So I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm really answering your question, but I think there's some ingredient technologies that are coming in that will help everybody actually make a better impact around sustainability.
Yeah, great. I mean, that's a great point about that. Google Nest Renew product, I guess product launch, feature launch, let's say. And I was just imagining everyone Googling Google Nest Review just now after you name dropped it. So,
yeah.
But in case everyone has...
So Jeff Hamill, say thank you.
Right, there you go. Nice little bump for them. But for people who didn't see it, basically what it kind of offers is a little bit of like a gamification aspect to it. I mean, Nest already kind of does it with showing the little leaf when you're being energy efficient, creates kind of this almost mobile game kind of vibe to how you're using your energy. But also in this case, it's giving people an opportunity to make contributions and really start thinking about their carbon impact, as opposed to just kind of, I don't know, thinking about using less power again to kind of push down your power bill. But because this is data related, I want to kind of get back to this topic we were discussing a little bit earlier, but we were more forward looking. So let's talk a little bit about how consumers are using data today regarding their energy. And Courtney, I was thinking you might want to answer this. We have all these new devices, be it, if it's going to be something like thermostats that are already in a lot of people's houses, or something coming down the road, EVs or appliances or something else. What are people going to be seeing in their reporting right now, and how are they kind of interacting with energy data?
Yeah, so I actually think there's a big gap in the way that consumers are interacting with their energy data today. I don't know if electricity is very engaging or easy to understand from a consumer. I have a background in engineering, and I've been in this space for a while, and I still get tripped up on power and energy. So I shared this statistic before also that an average resident spends 9 minutes a year thinking about their bill. The research presented today also shows that only 19% of households know what their utilities are offering in terms of energy management. And I think the number was 10% of people are taking advantage of energy programs that are offered today. So there's a gap. We need to figure out what people care about in terms of energy and what they really want to see. Earlier today, Anna used the term energy literacy, and I really love that because that's really, the goal that we want to get to together. So from our work so far, we've learned that there are a couple things. People want to save money, and they want to know when large appliances are about to fail. So that really boils down to convenience and dollar savings. And seeing, the low adoption of consumers interacting with their data, and what we have learned, we are really driving towards automation and control. So I think that comes out with the virtual power plants that we've mentioned, and how we can use the real-time data that we have today available for us, and how we can shift energy usage today without consumers needing to take many actions. So we're really easily integrating into their life. And I think there's a huge importance of data monitoring as well, because we need data today to validate different programs that we're running and validate what we think consumers want to see. So being able to show that we've saved you this amount of dollars a month, or being able to show the impact, whether it's carbon emissions or ESG scores, that's really driving down collecting the data. What is the impact, and then can we validate it? And so it's a need today for the data that we have to make sure we're validating our program. So for the first time, ever, with the products and monitoring available today, we can run these types of programs. We can develop the partnerships that we're talking about, and we can really validate the impact in this space.
Yeah, great. Brett, do you want to take a shot at that one too? Do you want to talk how people are using data right now?
Sure. I mean, just to add on to what Courtney had to say, I think, first we have to realize that there's a lot of customers who just aren't interacting with data at all, right? So once we get past kind of that group of customers, I think you find the most common way of interaction with the data today is through, the paper bills or HERS reports. So kind of old school. If you're really an honor student, you may go online and interact with your data through the utilities web application. And if you really want to learn more, there's folks who are using applications such as Sense to get kind of real-time data or real-time feedback. But those numbers are small. And I think it harkens back to what Courtney mentioned before, just like what keeps people coming back, like what can bring them in, what creates that persistent engagement with energy data. And so we truly believe that you need more than just energy to kind of continue to have consumers interact with their energy data. And so we kind of joke that home automation is kind of the sexy that continues to bring folks back. So enabling them to connect to their smart home devices and leverage them all kind of from one application, which then allows them to engage in energy, keeps them coming back to the platform, and actually gets the sizzle or the value from the energy manager, which actually drives the cost savings, which is what consumers want kind of at the end of the day. So I think, how they engage with data today is hopefully very different than how they'll engage with data down the road, especially as smart home devices proliferate.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's something everyone's going to need to be kind of building on consumer experience with looking at their data. I'm also realizing that we're having Google on later, so Hannah's going to be able to speak much more intelligently about it than I just did, trying to sum up. And there's also a link now in the chat, so if you guys want to look at some of their content to get caught up, that's great. So we have just a couple minutes left. So we've entered kind of the lightning round phase. So I want to hit some people with some questions and see what you got. Okay, so Wani, I think I'm going to go to you. It's going to be Wani or Peter. I'm not sure. Maybe Wani's going to have a point of view on this. What do you think about the potential for a carbon tax in the future?
I think it's the right solution, but I don't think it's going to pass.
I mean, that's near term. Do you think there's going to be a someday when things change and, you know, I don't know, maybe if the Biden administration doesn't, but like my kids' generation, who knows?
Yeah, you know, from an energy law perspective and equity and all that stuff, it's probably the most linear and easiest path. I do have a sort of an environmental law background. And so, you know, for me, that piece of it is probably the way to go. I think it's the most equitable, it's the most realistic. And I think it's also one of those things where like the biggest polluters are also open to doing that, right? I think it kind of aligns with the sustainability path and things like that. So, you know, I think in terms of just timing and things like that, probably not in the next, you know, 4 years or so, but you know, within a decade or so, I think that's probably going to happen. And I'm sure there's other leadership, you know, in other countries that will actually help drive that mandate.
So let me just kind of like, do you think it's going to be presented as a carbon tax in 10 years, or is this going to be, you know, kind of the magic of taxes where we kind of hide them in other names and kind of repackage them, and it's going to effectively be a carbon tax?
Gosh, I have no idea. You know, I mean, I guess I don't really understand like the semantics, right? Meaning, is carbon tax so distasteful, right, in the market where you do have to bury it, or is it actually better to be upfront and actually, you know, hit it on the head and just say, listen, this is what we're doing because, you know, we have this issue around climate change and we're seeing it, you know, in our real lives. So I'm not really sure.
Okay, well, this is why it's lightning round, Wani. Okay, we're gonna hit you with the hard one sometimes.
Yeah,
all right, Peter. Now I have a hard one for you. So you guys do home solar, but a lot of the research that I'm looking at points to people being really excited about community solar. Do you have kind of a perspective on how the two things interact? Do you hate community solar because you love home solar so much? What can you say about community solar?
Well, we love community solar, and it's a big business for us today because community solar requires solar systems, which requires inverters and batteries, and that's what we do. So purely from our own perspective, it's good. Community solar is a big deal. Many people don't have a kind of home where they can put solar on the roof. Many people live in apartments. Many people live in condos, which aren't ideally suited for rooftop solar systems. So this big trend for community solar, which is for third parties to put a ground mount system out in an area that might not be developable. Lots of this community solar is going in New York, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Wisconsin. And it enables homeowners to buy solar when they can't put it on their own roof. So it's a small but fast-growing segment. We're big fans. It's ultimately cheaper for a homeowner to do it themselves, but you have to own your own home. And so, you know, only about half of the single-family homes in the U.S. today are solar candidates because either the home is leased or rented, or it's in a kind of development where you can't put solar on it. So we're big fans.
Great. So one thing I think is really interesting and cool about home solar is that it can kind of reach the broadest audience, including low income and disadvantaged consumers who are sometimes kind of shut out of the smart product game that we're kind of looking at a lot. So that's something I'm really interested in. But that kind of raises this issue of barriers. So Mike, do you think you could comment on a barrier that you see that's kind of preventing some consumers from adopting smart energy devices and some changes that you see coming in the future that are going to resolve them?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we are very focused on this because, as I mentioned at the very early beginning, talking about putting a piece of hardware in the consumer's home just as a barrier. For the high end of the market, it's okay, but it just is a long-term barrier. So the solution, and this is where we're so excited to now be running as just software on next generation utility smart meters. And look, I know that smart meters in the past have not lived up to promises around consumer benefits, but we've been like deep into this now on the consumer side and now connected up what can happen on the meter side and are fully confident all the benefits we're getting with a $300 in-home electrician installed device. All those benefits are being made available on these meters and are going to be available to all consumers at no cost to the consumer. And from an equity perspective and getting that down into the entire consumer base of a utility, that's the only way that this is going to happen, and this is why we're so excited. Look, utilities have a strong incentive, and we're well aligned with how do we help all their customers, not just the people that can afford some gadget in their home.
Right. Now, speaking of gadgets in the home, this is reminding me of a research challenge that I've had, and I'm hoping someone can solve it for me. Tell me I'm doing my research wrong, or tell me that this is something real that's happening in the world. So we're seeing a kind of a plateau a little bit in smart thermostat adoption, even though when we talk to smart thermostat manufacturers, they say, you guys are crazy, we're selling tons of these. Steve, I want to put this on you. What can you, you look stunned. What can you tell me about smart thermostat adoption? What's happening? Why are we not seeing more people either aware that they have smart thermostats or adopting them for real?
It's a good question. I mean, I think there's probably two sides to the equation. Is number one, just I suppose an implementation side of it. There is in many homes, there's still a complexity about how you would actually install it and utilize it. Especially in older properties. I think that's certainly a barrier to entry at the moment that we're seeing. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of these smart devices, as somebody mentioned earlier, have been also hit a little bit by this sort of security concerns in the whole IoT industry, where smart devices are seen in certain sectors like it's a security risk. And we're seeing that certainly with elderly people who are certainly nervous about taking in some of this technology into their home, and that's probably impacting it a little bit as well. So I mean, I've not seen the statistics myself to say that it has reduced. I just know from the fact, the areas that we focus on in testing a lot of these systems, we've certainly seen these areas sort of started to come up about in terms of testing the security of it. Suddenly became more important than it's probably ever been.
Yeah, I think the privacy idea is one we're going to be looking at. I actually have a report coming out later this year on data privacy, so good opportunity for me to plug. And also, so we're kind of out of time here today. It's been an awesome discussion. Thanks everyone for kind of rolling with us a little bit, being flexible in terms of moving around platforms and time being pushed back a little bit, and also handling some questions from the audience and some weird questions that I brought to you that I didn't prepare you guys for. Everyone's been great. I really appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break here, and then we're going to hear from Google. And then just a reminder, everyone, please join the networking session so that we can continue conversations and pick up any questions that people still have left over.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.